And if you have a Citrix environment, try it out. We have had 100% success rate with one of these attacks, just whether it's a hotkey or whether it's IE, or there are two other demos that I would have liked to show you. Oops. So one of the common use case scenario that I've seen is a restricted desktop. The idea is, say if you had an HR application where you wanted users to log in and only fill out a form on the HR application, but you didn't want to open that HR application over the VPN or over the external site. So you allow users to log in over the Citrix gateway. You only show them this particular icon where they double click and then go to that site, fill out the form and then log out. If you look at the start menu, there would be nothing just other than the logout button. Everything else would be either hidden or disabled, and on the desktop you would only have the shortcut to the HR portal. Now what you could do is, once again, as I said before, if you could right click on the system, then again there's hardly a chance where you cannot compromise the system. You can right click, make a new shortcut, and in the shortcut specify any executable that you want, any path that you want, any folder that you want. So that's one way. And again, I'm sorry I can't show that to you, but you can create a shortcut to C:. The other thing is create a batch file. If you make a batch file, it's automatically an executable file. Put any command that you want in there. Sometimes it's complicated because you won't be able to change the extension. So what you do is create a new folder, and in the folder go in the options, change the options such that you can see the extension, change the extension to from txt to a batch file. And again, then from there you'll be able to launch anything that you want. The other problem is on a Windows environment, Windows hosting host scripting is enabled by default. There are only 2 lines of code that you need on a VBS file. If you can create a .vbs file, again, you don't need the .vbs file to begin with. Make a .txt file, change the extension to .vbs, edit the file, add these 2 lines of code. Basically, you're just launching a shell again with these 2 lines of code. It's not too complicated. Anyone would be able to do it. Lastly, a lot of times what we've seen is Microsoft applications are published using Citrix because of licensing issues or whatever. They don't want users to install Microsoft Office on every laptop. They just publish it through Citrix environment, and the idea is you save the files on your network share, but they all use the same application. So the same old exploits, if you can pull up the file explorer, that will do the trick. You can save as, and in save as you'll be able to again see all the files that you want. You can press F1, launch the help system. Again, from the help system, launch a browser. From the browser, go anywhere on the internet. Finally, the macros. We all know macros are extremely damaging. You can write viruses, you can write worms using macros. From the macros, you can launch the VBA, which is essentially a stripped down version of the Visual Studio. If you can write a macro, it will point the problems, it will compile the code, it will have access on all the files on the system, and then again the same code that we used in the previous slide is all that you need in that macro. And because you own that file and you are writing that macro, you'll have permissions to run it. Run that macro, you'll have a command shell on the remote system. You don't even need access to the desktop. I'm sorry I couldn't show any of these demos. The idea was to actually walk the demos with you and see it working, but things didn't go as planned. So when thinking about the remediation strategies, when I originally thought about it, I thought that it would be really simple to harden the box, at least using the Citrix presentation server, where they would give you the options. Okay, disable access to file system, disable access to executables, but it's not how it works. Essentially, Citrix doesn't even talk about hardening in any of the guides. Anyone been through the Citrix guide? It's pitiful. I mean, all they talk about in terms of security is SSL and 128-bit encryption. I really don't care about 128-bit encryption. I'm sorry?
But Citrix doesn't talk about it because Citrix relies on Microsoft controls of file system and all the registries and all the locking down desktop. desktop, all the controls of Microsoft, not Citrix.
That is exactly right, but at the same time, the argument is Citrix gives the perception that when you publish an application, the users will not be able to access anything else. They don't even point to the fact that it is the responsibility of an administrator to go to do hardening using group policy orchestrator. They just leave the administrator by themselves to figure this out. There is no hardening mechanism, there's no hardening guide. Every time there is a word security, there's a 128-bit encryption associated with it. And as I was going to say, 128-bit encryption is fantastic, great, but how many times do actually people break encryption and get into systems? In my experience, most of the time, people break into such silly environments using some of the common attack vectors, and that's how they compromise the system. Okay, we'll see if this works a little later now. So when I went about accessing the group policy orchestrator to see if I can harden the system enough, there were 1,300 registry settings, and quite honestly, I tried a lot of these settings, and I didn't feel comfortable that just because I turned on one setting or two settings or a few set of settings on the group policy, it's not like I can't access the file explorer or I cannot access the command shell. It seems like it's really complicated, it's very twisted, there's no good manual or guidance around how you go about hardening the system. So what are the steps that you can take? So the first thing that I saw on one of the forums was a very good idea is if you're using Active Directory, then what you can do is make a new group in the Active Directory, add users to it, and then only provide permissions to that group for a limited set of folders and executables. So that way, I mean, again, I'm not completely sure if that will work because, again, the users will need to run the operating system. The operating system needs privileges to run files. I haven't tried it out, but that's a good idea if you can really make it work. The other thing is make an assumption that your Citrix environment is never going to be 100% protected. So what you can do is put it under firewall such that it cannot access anywhere else on the network. It can only go into certain parts of the internal network or on the DMZ. Any other access on the system should be restricted. Shouldn't be allowed the file system on the user system should not be mapped on the Citrix server so that it's not easy for him to just copy files. So using those hardening mechanisms, yes, you can harden the Citrix environment, but will I put my neck on the line and say will that work? Can I do it? I don't think so. I don't feel confident enough that you can actually harden it to the point that people cannot, at least authorized users cannot compromise the system. And then again, I discovered a few tools that promise to harden the system enough such that users, attackers cannot exploit the system. I haven't been through all the list, but here's the list that I found pretty comprehensive. So if you want to make a note of that, play with some of those tools. If you're using Citrix in your environment, you're welcome to do so. Questions? All right, let me just try and see if I can get access to wireless here. Can someone turn on the lights just in case anyone has any questions? I'll take the questions. Not yet. Still trying to get an IP address here.